One of the most memorable scenes in Cecil B. DeMille's classic, epic biblical film, The Ten Commandments, is the scene in which the Israelites carry the bones of Joseph out of Egypt at the moment of the Exodus. In that scene, those carrying the bones are at the very front of the procession, leading the way for the rest of our people, and they sing a great little song. Maybe some of you remember it. Bones of Joseph, many colors was his coat. Cantors could do it much better. And as they pass by, a small Israelite boy pulls on his blind grandfather's sleeve and says, "Grandfather, Aaron and the elders carry a shrouded body." And his grandfather stoically replies, "Those are the bones of Joseph, to be laid to rest in his own land." And what I love so much about that scene, which I remember vividly from when I was a kid, and I used to watch the Ten Commandments on cable every year in the days leading up to Passover, is that Cecil B. DeMille really emphasizes the fact that the Exodus wasn't merely an exodus. It was also a funeral procession for Joseph. You may recall that the final scene in the book of Genesis recounts the death of Joseph. Joseph, at 110 years old, is on his deathbed, surrounded by his brothers as he tells them that the Israelites are going to be in Egypt for many generations, but eventually God will remember them and redeem them. And then Joseph does something fascinating. He makes his brothers swear that when the moment of redemption arrives, his bones will be carried with the Israelites out of Egypt to be buried in the land of Israel. Vayashba Yosef et bnei Israel, and Joseph made his brothers swear that they would do this. And as we read in yesterday's Torah reading, when Moses goes to retrieve Joseph's bones at the moment of the Exodus, he hearkens back to that promise that Joseph made his brothers swear hundreds of years earlier. Vayikach Moshe et atzmot Yosef imo, ki hashbea hishbia et bnei Israel. Moses took the bones of Joseph with him because Joseph had made his brothers, the Israelites, swear an oath that they would carry his bones up from Egypt to the land of Israel. So while everybody else was busy taking gold and all kinds of other treasures from the Egyptians at the moment of the Exodus, Moses preoccupied himself with finding the bones of Joseph so that he could fulfill a promise that was made hundreds of years before he was born. And I want to point out that that very same dynamic played out between David Ben-Gurion and Theodore Herzl as well, just after the establishment of the State of Israel. Herzl, the founding father of modern political Zionism, died in 1904 at the age of just 44. And though he died in Vienna, he made it clear in his last will and testament that his wish was to be buried in the Jewish homeland, which was still a dream to the rest of the world, but in Herzl's mind, it was a foregone conclusion. And when the state was established in 1948, David Ben-Gurion, Israel's first prime minister, made sure that Herzl's remains were brought to Jerusalem to be buried at Har Herzl, Israel's national cemetery named for its founding visionary. And when Ben-Gurion spoke at Herzl's reinterment ceremony in 1949, here's what he said: "Only two people have had the privilege of having their remains brought to Israel by their liberated nation: Joseph from Egypt and Herzl from Vienna." And when Joseph made his brothers swear that they would take his remains to the land of Israel all the way back at the end of the book of Genesis, he knew, of course, that his brothers would die long before the moment of the Exodus. What he was really making his brothers swear was that their descendants throughout the generations would not forget him. That their children and their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren and their great-great-grandchildren would always remember Joseph, because as long as the memory of Joseph is kept alive, as long as he is continued to be spoken of as one of the great figures of the Jewish story, then he will never truly be gone. His memory will always endure as a blessing throughout the ages. And the Israelites held up their end of the bargain. They kept the memory of Joseph alive. The rabbis of the Talmud teach that as our ancestors wandered through the wilderness, they had 2 boxes at the front of their procession. One was the Aron HaBrit, the Ark of the Covenant that contained the 2 tablets which Moses brought down from Sinai, and the other was the coffin that contained the bones of Joseph. And when people would see the Israelites marching through the wilderness with 2 boxes side by side, they would ask, "What's in those boxes?" And the Israelites would respond by saying, "The person whose remains lie in this box fulfilled the commandments that are enshrined in that box." In other words, Joseph's bones were so important to our ancestors that they carried them directly alongside the 10 Commandments themselves. And each and every one of us is a participant in that promise that was made to Joseph at the end of the book of Genesis. Because each and every one of us, whether explicitly or implicitly, has agreed to keep the memories of those who came before us alive. And at no time of year is that more true than on Pesach. Each year at my family Seder, we use the silverware that my wife's grandmother Rose brought with her from Europe after surviving the Shoah. And I imagine that each and every one of you sitting here this morning has some kind of family heirloom that you use at your Seder every year. Whether it's your grandfather's Kiddush cup or your grandmother's Seder plate or a family Haggadah that has been passed down from generation to generation so that its pages are completely filled with wine stains, we all have those family heirlooms. I never had the privilege of meeting my wife's grandmother, Rose, but I know that every year when I use her silverware at our Seder table, I am fulfilling the very same promise that our ancestors fulfilled for Joseph at the moment of the Exodus. I'm actively participating in the process of keeping Grandma Rose's memory alive, and as long as her memory is kept alive, she will never truly be gone. So as we begin the Yizkor service this morning, we recognize that it is our responsibility to fulfill that very same promise that was made to Joseph all those thousands of years ago. And we fulfill that promise not only by using the silverware or the Kiddush cups of those who came before us, but we do it by telling their stories, by teaching their lessons, by sharing their wisdom. And we hope and we pray that one day, many, many years from now, when we are physically gone, that our children will continue to use our heirlooms and share our stories and teach the lessons that we taught. Because in doing so, they will be keeping our memories alive, just as our ancestors did with the bones of Joseph. Our God and God of our ancestors, our grief lingers. Part of us is afraid to let go, afraid that we will forget. Give us the strength and the wisdom to share the stories of our loved ones with wonder and with joy. Let us pay tribute to their days and their years, and may the memories of those who are no longer here always endure as a blessing within our midst. We turn to page